Okay, this is chapter 3. These are the challenges of urbanization. So, this is all of these chapters are overlaying on top of each other. So, this is going to be when people begin moving from the rural areas into the cities for industrialization type reasons. We are talking again about the East. So, this is starting around 1870 and will continue into the 1900s. You have the American city. It's emerging as this powerful symbol of rapidly transforming. You have the reshape of industrial growth, you have the technological innovations. So you're going to have these massive demographic shifts. All right. You have push pull factors. You have the push factor of the people living on these rural farms where families worked together. They got up during the daylight. They ate their breakfast together. They relaxed together. They worked until, the nighttime hours where they could not farm anymore. So you have these families who have always been together. And then you have technologies and farm equipment, which is going to lessen the amount of work the family needs to do. So you're going to have people from the farming communities eventually move towards these factories and these places where they can find work, these city centers. So that's kind of the push factor. Then the pull factor is going to be the adventure, the coming in to work on these new technologies, coming into these new environments where they're not on a farm, they have all this stuff in a city, and it's going to draw thousands of workers in seeking a wage, a steady wage, knowing what money they make for what hours they give. You have the electricity, the lighting factor that now factories can operate at night. It's no longer dark. Areas are not lit by candles. So you have the whole advancement in electricity, which is going to create the actual clock system, time. We're going to start creating the idea of time and working these certain hours, whereas before out on the farm, you just woke up when it was light, you worked, and when it was dark, you couldn't see anymore, you went into the house. Okay, so we've got these push pull factors, but what is going to happen is with the mass amount of people who move from rural to urban, which is the city, it's going to change everything. It's going to change the family structure. It's going to change the way people live. The infrastructure is not set in place. So the infrastructure is your basic needs, your plumbing, your housing, your sanitation, how you get rid of the trash, how you control diseases, roads. Those infrastructures are not in place. And you have all these people move in, and it's going to create sanitation issues. It's going to create disease spreading, typhoid, cholera. It's going to create living conditions that are horrid. And we're going to really look at a dark side of how all of this growth and promise and opportunity really is going to be overshadowed by a dark, harsh reality of what it was like for the people who were not the wealthy. Okay, these are tenements. And if you see, these are apartments. And at this time, there's not adequate plumbing. So you just threw your waste, whatever you needed to, your garbage, you threw it over your railing into the streets. All right, so at New York at this time, is what we'll talk about. You have these dwellings that were single family dwellings. So they were only meant for a single family. And you're going to create multiple families in these accommodations that were meant just for one family. So these are going to be called tenements. And you're going to have in 1900 more than 2.3 million people are going to live in these housing tenements that were only really meant for 50,000 or so. And these conditions are going to be filthy. It's going to be poorly lit. There's no plumbing. You have multiple families sharing one toilet. Okay, so you're going to have disease, and you're going to have really people are going to struggle to survive. These are pictures of tenements of people just trying to create structures that they can live in while they're working in the city. Okay, these are actual tenements in New York. These are called dumbbell tenements. And if you look at the plan, it's going to put it's parlor, which is like a living room. It's like a front room, and then you have your living room, then you have bedroom. Um, so what they're going to do in these dumbbell tenements, they're created in 1870 in New York to maximize the area. They're going to divide the inner buildings into rooms. So you have these 7-story structures. Um, you have 34-room apartments. So they're going to pack as many as 4,000 people into just one single city block. So you're going to have on one floor, which you're looking at in that diagram, you're going to have 16 families living on this one floor. And they're going to share, these 16 families are going to share 2 toilets. Okay, so you're going to have sanitation issues. Um, you're going to have them all have, one family will be in one bedroom, or maybe 2 families in one bedroom. You're going to have issues with ventilation. That's going to cause more issues with disease. You have fire issues. You have, just filthy living conditions. And what's interested, I don't think I have it, but so these are horrible, these tenements that you see, these dumbbell tenements, you see the picture in the right hand corner. These are horrible living conditions in this time. But in today, if you went and Googled this and looked, these tenements have now been turned into like these multi-million dollar living areas. It's insane. Okay, so this is kind of what one family, they have one little bedroom. You could have 6 or 7 in your family, and you're living in this one little bedroom, and you're sharing, the toilet area. So these are kind of how these tenements look. You got your kids outside playing on the rail because that was safe. Oh, I do have it for you. Good. Okay. So the left-hand side is when these people are just living in absolute poverty. There's your bathroom, horrible conditions. And then the right-hand side is what they are today and how they're like these multi-million dollar, very, very expensive areas to rent. And these landlords have just made a fortune off of this. So you can see the difference. The rooms on the right were the rooms on the left. All right. So what you're tested on with Star is Jane Addams, The Whole House. This is in Chicago. These are kind of reform movements. Jane Addams is a reformer. And so she is famous for The Whole House in Chicago in 1889. She's the main person. And what she does is she's trying to support working class women. and immigrant families who are coming in by teaching them evening classes, giving them child care, giving them health care, access to libraries, and creating programs to help newcomers or people who need to adjust to the life in the United States. So these settlement workers, they're going to witness the realities of this urban poverty that the people are dealing with. And this is going to become a bigger political agenda. They're going to push for reforms. So at this time, you have, what the landlords were doing with the dumbbell tenements, where they're just sticking tons of people in there and they're living in horrible conditions. So they're going to work on improving housing laws. Child labor, we haven't gotten into that. That's a huge issue right now. Well, at this time, not right now. Um, and Jane Addams is going to really fight for worker compensations. So, to reform how these people are being treated and living. You're eventually going to have the National Child Labor Committee come out. It's not until 1912 that children are even valued, until we start even marking birth rates and death rates of children. This is one of her houses that she has, and you see the house right there, the whole house, and then you see the inside and and the children working. Well, I'm sorry, the children with the libraries and working on education. Okay, so something that's not talked about, and you're not really tested that much on it, but we're going to go through it. You're not tested by the state, but it's a very important part of history, is these families that come in to these urban cities and factories. They're going to start breaking up the families, and everybody's going to be working in a different factory. And child labor is huge at this time. There's nobody protecting children. All right, so you have children in these unsafe jobs. They're working 12 to 14 hours a day. These kids in factory, we're going to look at all different jobs that children did. These kids in factories are working long hours. They're making maybe 20 cents per day. All of the family is struggling to survive. So women and children, they're all separated, working in all different areas. The thing with these jobs is they like the children because they have tiny little hands. So if something gets stuck in a machine, they can put their tiny little hand in there and unstick it. The problem with this is there's no laws, there's no regulation. So your factory owners, your bosses, who are making the money off of paying the kids 20 cents, if a little kid or a woman put their hand in and their arm, hand, fingers got chopped off, they would get in trouble for clogging up the machine and get dismissed. There's no benefits, no protection at all. So these are the harsh realities that these kids are working in. Let me see if I can, sorry about that. Did not know that I needed to click on that. I'm trying to move to the next slide. There we go. Okay. Taylorism. This is done by Frederick Taylor, and it's going to be called a scientific management system. So what he's going to do is he's going to create the stopwatch management. It's a system he's going to use to make sure that the people are working as efficiently as possible to produce as much product, as much labor as they can. So he's going to eliminate any aspects of work that he feels are not efficient, not profitable. So it's going to change the relationship between labor and management. He's going to make sure that tasks are broken down and jobs are simplified. This is why factory owners are going to hire women and children to perform them, because it's not going to take much knowledge. They just have to do their part. Um, so he's going to create a system that is not better for the worker. It's just getting the most work out of the worker. All right, so here's some different jobs that you can see. Children and women, because they're small, were used in the coal mining industry. And they're used because they're small and they can get through those tunnels. This is pictures of your boys who were coal miners. And you have your children up there in the factory. The right hand picture, they're doing thread work. Same as the lower pictures are doing work with thread. Okay, so this is again hitting on child labor. We talked about it. Children were small. Um, Children aren't going to rise up and fight you either, so they weren't worried about like grown men, fighting the boss in the factory. Children were easy to control. Women are easy to control, but children are going to work in all different mines, textile, which is anything that's being made, glass factory. You're going to have newsboys. You're going to have messengers, shoe shiners. You're going to have your chimney sweeps. Children have zero value. Well, let me make that clearer. Children of the working class, only the working class, and the poverty class have no value. The children of the bosses who own the factories and the wealthy people, those children, they're in school, they have nannies, they're being fed, they're being tucked into their beds, they have toys. It's the children of the other, the working class, and especially the poverty, who have no value. All right, this is a chimney sweep. And I do spend a lot of time on child labor because I want you to realize the inequalities and this type of thinking, because you are the future and I expect you to change things. Okay, so how this would work is the smallest child was at the top. And they would start with the biggest child, and then you would go all the way up, making a pyramid to the smallest child to work and clean the chimneys. Um, it was not a nice job, of course. Children would be sold into, you could have a toddler, a 3 or 4 year old, sold into these chimney gangs. And they would go and they would clean these chimneys, and the children would suffer all different issues. These are pictures of how the chimneys looked and the children having to go up and crawl up the chimneys. And then that's the right hand side is a picture of an actual chimney. And this is what they're stacked on top of each other's, shoulders, cleaning these chimneys. Now remember the children that we're talking about, the poor, um, that are not valued at all, have no worth to society, so there's no protections. um, their parents are selling them into these different jobs, and like we were talking about before, the parents who are in the working class and the poverty, they have no protections. If anything happens, if they get fired, if they get injured and they can't work anymore, there is no help for them. There's no aid. Okay, these are match girls, and the match girls would be between the age of 4 and 16. They worked long hours and they worked in a match factory making matchsticks. But the issue was that the fumes and the things they would have to do were toxic, and they would rot out their teeth, and they would destroy the bones in their jaws. And this was actually called posy jaw. And it was a disease that they would get from having to lick these different matches and the way that they made them, with the different hazardous chemicals that were used. And again, nobody cares, especially about the girls. Nobody cares about these children. These are breaker boys. They worked in the coal mines, and their job was to separate the coal and break the coal. So they would break the coal with their hands, and they worked long hours for nothing. So I hope you're understanding, because they're women and children, the abuse that could be done to them, that they were so easily to control by the powerful. Okay, all right, so you have, at this time also, you have orphans everywhere. You have some children, you have street children, which we're going to get into in a minute. You had the newspaper boys who were called newsies, and they would sell newspapers. They actually, although they were homeless, they kind of controlled their own business. They would go and buy the newspapers from the seller for a certain amount, and then they would go and sell them themselves, and they got to keep whatever money they made. So they actually were kind of more independent, if you can be at this time. They're actually kind of running their small business. But then, of course, if the papers didn't sell, they were out that money. But these kids lived on the streets. Um, Women were desperate. Some families were desperate to sell their children, and children were sold. And children lived like this on the street. These are actual pictures of kids on the street. These are the newspaper boys I was telling you about. Most of my work that I've done is in London, homeless children in London, not as much in America. Okay, so this is a group of homeless kids. When reformers come in to start to change what they're seeing with the children, everything starts in England and eventually comes to America. So Charles Dickinson, this is England, this is in America. He creates the book Oliver Twist. The idea is, let's create information, stories, pictures, whatnot, that the middle class will read. The middle and upper class, they read, they have books, they have leisure time. We're going to target them with these stories, and maybe they'll connect these stories to actually what they're seeing on the street. So Charles Dickens is one of the famous ones that creates Oliver Twist. But what you have here for US is you have Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis is known as a muckraker, and this is important. These are things you need to know. Muckrakers, muck is the gunk on the floor, the disgusting stuff on the floor. And raker is using a rake, like you'd rake leaves, to rake up the muck. So being called a muckraker is not a compliment, okay? This in today's environment would be fake news. Jacob Riis is reporting fake news. This doesn't really happen. People really aren't on the streets. We're really not treating the children this way. They're not living in poverty. We're not walking over the children. So that's what a muckraker was. A muckraker is going to be somebody who is reporting against what society wants them to. They're trying to report the truth. These are reformers. They're reforming what they're seeing. Jacob Riis is going to do this through pictures. Okay, look at this picture. This is New York. These kids are just standing right next to a dead horse that nobody's moved. And they're just playing barefoot right next to a dead horse. Um, all right, we're going to go into other reformers you'll hear about through lecture and the readings that you have. So this is in 1853 to 1947. Um, when we create in 1901, I believe, is when we create the Children's Aid Society. So the wealthy middle class, they're starting to realize, oh, hey, maybe there is something we should do. But I want you to still understand at how they are looking at these people as these children, how they still view them. So this statement is something that I found from an annual report of the Children's Aid Society in 1855. So this is literally what they're writing in their report. And what they wrote, some of the things I pulled out, is they call these homeless children wild children of the street, the civilizing and Christianity of these children. Now, this next thing, the first few words I think you should have, teachers should be praised. I think we'll hold on to that one. But seriously, they say that the teachers who have gone to try and teach these kids should be praised for raising up the wretched, outcast children. Can you imagine me calling you a wretched, outcast children? And going further, bad temper, filthy, invested with vermin. Okay, I would totally make the news with that one. But in 1855, writing in their annual report, which is like, like what you have to report to whoever their boss is, these are the words and these are still the views that they have of these children. Okay, this is just some different pictures of babies who were left. The train, they're trying to move some of the inner children who have been abandoned to different, more rural areas who might take them. And then lastly, this is in the United States, the Children's Bureau in 1912. This is when somebody decides, hey, maybe the children are our future. So the health of the children is the power of the nation becomes their slogan. And in 1912, they start to record children's birth certificates and they start to track death rates. Now, there's still not a lot of protection here, but what's going to eventually happen with reform is school. You get to go to school, and that's going to become a big thing.